Welcome to the Bible Quiz. Today, we're diving into the hard stuff, 25 Old Testament deep cuts from Genesis to the Exile, priest kings, strange signs, courtroom prophets, and kings who ignored warnings. Expect crisp prompts, tight timers, and questions that separate casual readers from serious students. Before we begin, hit like, subscribe, and share with a friend who loves Scripture. Congrats to our 8 top scores from the last video: Sharon Prouse, Carol T. Hunter, Gloria Van Lingen, Violetta Flores, Pushpanjali Devi, Tilhabalagang Magola, Mary Cuddy Thaliath, Bobby. Outstanding work. Track your score and note the one question that surprised you most. Ready to test your Old Testament's grit? Now let's begin. Question 1. Which priest king brought bread and wine to Abram? A. Eli. B. Jethro. C. Abimelech. D. Melchizedek. You get 10 seconds. That's D. Melchizedek. Melchizedek appears suddenly in Genesis chapter 14, verse 18 as the king of Salem and priest of God Most High, blessing Abram and offering bread and wine. His brief yet mysterious role foreshadows priest kingship themes and later receives theological expansion in Psalm chapter 110, verse 4, and Hebrews chapter 7. Abram's acceptance of his blessing signifies recognition of divine authority beyond his own lineage, showing God's priesthood predates Levi and exists universally across nations. Question 2. Who asked a prophet to curse Israel but ended up hearing blessings instead? A. Agag. B. Balak. C. Sihon. D. Sisera. You get 10 seconds. That's B. Balak. Balak, king of Moab, summoned Balaam to curse Israel as they approached Canaan. Numbers chapters 22 to 24. However, God intervened, turning every intended curse into a blessing. Balaam's donkey famously spoke when the prophet resisted God's angel. Rather than weakening Israel, Balak's plan affirmed God's faithful protection. These chapters highlight divine sovereignty and the futility of opposing God's covenant people, even through spiritual manipulation or hired prophecy. Question 3. Which king was struck with leprosy for unlawfully burning incense in the temple? A. Ahaz. B. Joash. C. Uzziah. D. Amaziah. You get 10 seconds. That's C. Uzziah. King Uzziah prospered until pride led him to overstep priestly boundaries by burning incense in the Lord's temple. 2 Chronicles chapter 26, verses 16 to 21. Confronted by priests, he raged. Then leprosy appeared on his forehead, and he lived isolated until death. This judgment emphasizes God's strict separation of kingly and priestly functions under the Mosaic order. Uzziah's fate serves as a cautionary example against pride and unauthorized worship in sacred roles. Question 4. What miraculous object floated in water when a prophet intervened? A. A ring. B. A staff. C. A shield. D. An axe head. You get 10 seconds. That's D, an axe head. During Elisha's ministry, a borrowed iron axe head fell into the Jordan River. 2 Kings chapter 6, verses 1 to 7. The prophet cut a stick, threw it into the water, and the iron floated so the borrower would not incur debt. This small yet striking miracle illustrates God's concern for everyday needs and His power over natural law. It also reinforces Elisha's role as God's compassionate representative among prophets and humble workers. Question 5. Whose daughters petitioned Moses for inheritance rights due to having no brothers? A. Zelophehad, B. Zipporah, C. Rebekah, D. Hannah. You get 10 seconds. That's A. Zelophehad. Zelophehad's 5 daughters, Mahlah, Noah, Hoglah, Milcah, and Tirzah, boldly approached Moses, asking to inherit their father's land since he had no sons. Numbers chapter 27, verses 1 to 11. God affirmed their request, establishing inheritance rights for daughters under similar circumstances. This event reveals justice in God's law and recognition of women's legal standing in Israel's covenant community. Grow, share, repeat. Hit subscribe and keep the Bible adventure going. Question 6. Which judge made a rash vow that resulted in his daughter's fate? A. Jair, B. Gideon, C. Samson, D. Jephthah. You get 10 seconds. That's D. Jephthah. Jephthah vowed that if God granted victory over the Ammonites, he would offer the first thing coming out of his house to meet him. Judges chapter 11, verses 30 to 40. Tragically, his daughter was the one who greeted him. Whether this meant death or lifelong dedication to celibacy is debated, but the passage warns against impulsive vows before God and highlights the seriousness of spoken commitments in ancient Israelite faith and law. Question 7. Who dreamed of a ladder reaching from earth to heaven? A. Isaac, B. Jacob, C. Joseph, D. Abraham. You get 10 seconds. That's B. Jacob. Jacob experienced a divine dream at Bethel where a ladder or stairway reached heaven with angels ascending and descending. God reaffirmed the covenant promised to Abraham and Isaac, declaring Jacob the chosen heir. This moment transformed Jacob's journey from fleeing Esau into encountering God's presence. The naming of Bethel, house of God, and Jacob's vow underscore divine guidance through exile, uncertainty, and family conflict. Genesis chapter 28, verses 13 to 22. Question 8. Who killed a lion with his bare hands as a young man? A. Saul, B. David, C. Samson, D. Benaiah. You get 10 seconds. That's C. Samson. Samson, empowered by the Spirit of the Lord, killed a young lion with his bare hands on the road to Timnah. Later he discovered bees and honey in its carcass, forming a riddle about strength and sweetness. Samson's feats reflected divine calling despite personal flaws. His story illustrates God working through imperfect individuals to accomplish deliverance for Israel during Philistine oppression. Judges, chapters 13 to 16. Question 9. Which prophet saw a valley of dry bones come to life? A. Hosea. B. Ezekiel. C. Isaiah. D. Jeremiah. You get 10 seconds. That's B. Ezekiel. In Ezekiel chapter 37, verses 1 to 14, God placed Ezekiel in a valley of dry bones and commanded him to prophesy. The bones assembled, grew flesh, and received breath, symbolizing Israel's national restoration from exile. The vision declares God's power to revive hopeless situations and reunite his scattered people. The repeated phrase, "You shall know that I am the Lord," underscores God's sovereign intervention in history and spiritual resurrection. Question 10. Who interpreted Pharaoh's dreams of 7 fat and 7 lean cows? A. Joseph. B. Daniel. C. Elisha. D. Ezra. You get 10 seconds. That's A. Joseph. Joseph, sold into slavery by his brothers, rose to prominence by interpreting Pharaoh's dreams of 7 years of plenty, followed by 7 years of famine. Genesis chapter 41, verses 1 to 32. His wisdom and spirit-given insight led to Egypt's strategic grain storage, saving nations from starvation. Joseph's journey reveals divine providence. What others meant for evil, God used for good. Genesis chapter 50, verse 20, demonstrating his sovereignty even through suffering and betrayal. Question 11. Which king demanded wise men tell him both his dream and its interpretation? A. Cyrus. B. Darius. C. Hezekiah. D. Nebuchadnezzar. You get 10 seconds. That's D. Nebuchadnezzar. In Daniel chapter 2, Nebuchadnezzar demanded his advisors reveal both his forgotten dream and its meaning, exposing false wisdom. Daniel prayed, and God revealed the dream. A statue representing successive kingdoms and God's eternal kingdom, Daniel credited God alone for wisdom. This passage highlights divine revelation surpassing human power and sets the framework for biblical prophetic history and messianic expectation. Question 12. Who was turned into a pillar of salt for looking back at a doomed city? A. Lot. B. Naomi. C. Lot's wife. D. Lot's daughter. You get 10 seconds. That's C. Lot's wife. God destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah for grievous sin, rescuing Lot's family but commanding them not to look back. Genesis chapter 19, verse 17. Lot's wife looked back and became a pillar of salt. Genesis chapter 19, verse 26. Her fate symbolizes divided devotion and longing for a corrupt past. Jesus later referenced her as a warning against spiritual hesitation, Luke chapter 17, verse 32, underlining the seriousness of obedience and wholehearted pursuit of God's call. Question 13. What body of water turned to blood during Moses' confrontation with Pharaoh? A. Nile. B. Jordan. C. Red Sea. D. Euphrates. You get 10 seconds. That's A. Nile. The first plague turned the Nile's waters into blood when Moses struck it with his staff. Exodus chapter 7, verses 17 to 21. Fish died, the river stank, and Egyptians dug for fresh water. This judgment targeted Egypt's life source and religious symbolism, confronting Pharaoh's defiance and the nation's gods. The plague narrative culminates in God demonstrating supremacy over creation and nations, fulfilling his promise to liberate Israel with mighty acts. Exodus chapter 6, verse 6. Question 14. Which prophet confronted King Ahab and the prophets of Baal at Mount Carmel? A. Amos. B. Elijah. C. Micah. D. Elisha. You get 10 seconds. That's B. Elijah. Elijah challenged 450 prophets of Baal on Mount Carmel, calling fire from heaven to consume his sacrifice after water saturated it. 1 Kings chapter 18, verses 20 to 39. Baal's prophets failed, proving their God powerless. Israel fell face down, declaring, "The Lord, He is God." The miracle judged idolatry and affirmed Yahweh alone. Rules nature and covenant. Elijah's bold faith marked a pivotal turning point in Israel's spiritual battle. Question 15. Who rebuilt Jerusalem's walls amid opposition and prayerful leadership? A. Ezra. B. Zerubbabel. C. Nehemiah. D. Joshua, son of Nun. You get 10 seconds. That's C. Nehemiah. Nehemiah, cupbearer to the Persian king, returned to rebuild Jerusalem's walls despite mockery, plots, and threats. Nehemiah chapters 2 to 6. Through prayer, strategic planning, and rallying the people, he completed the wall in 52 days. His leadership balanced spiritual devotion and practical wisdom. The narrative emphasizes divine favor, perseverance under pressure, and covenant renewal, restoring communal identity after exile. Nehemiah chapters 8 to 10. Question 16. Who cut down the sacred pole, Asherah, and tore down Baal's altar at night? A. Gideon. B. Samuel. C. Asa. D. Jehu. You get 10 seconds. That's A. Gideon. Before leading Israel, Gideon obeyed God by secretly destroying his father's altar to Baal and cutting down the Asherah pole. Judges chapter 6, verses 25 to 31. Fearing his family and townspeople, he acted at night. When confronted, his father defended him, saying Baal should fig. This moment marks Israel's spiritual confrontation with idolatry and establishes Gideon's divine calling before military victory. Question 17. Which king wrote a decree to kill all Jewish infants but was resisted by Hebrew midwives? A. Xerxes. B. Amalek. C. Pharaoh. D. Sennacherib. You get 10 seconds. That's C. Pharaoh. The Egyptian pharaoh ordered Hebrew midwives Shiphrah and Puah to kill newborn Hebrew boys. Exodus chapter 1 verses 15 to 17. They feared God rather than obeying the king. Allowing the boys to live, God rewarded them with families. This early conflict sets the stage for Moses' birth and mirrors later biblical themes of tyrants opposing God's people. The passage emphasizes civil courage and faith in divine justice against oppressive human authority. Question 18. Who had a vision of the Ancient of Days and one like a son of man? A. Ezekiel. B. Isaiah. C. Zechariah. D. Daniel. You get 10 seconds. That's D. Daniel. Daniel's night vision revealed the Ancient of Days seated in judgment and one like a son of man receiving everlasting dominion. Daniel chapter 7 verses 9 to 14. This prophetic scene depicts divine authority over earthly kingdoms and anticipates Messianic rule. Daniel's imagery shapes later Jewish and Christian eschatology. It appears during exile, affirming that empires rise and fall under God's sovereignty, while His kingdom endures forever beyond human power. Question 19. Which prophet married a woman symbolizing Israel's unfaithfulness? A. Joel. B. Hosea. C. Micah. D. Zechariah. You get 10 seconds. That's B. Hosea. God commanded Hosea to marry Gomer, a woman whose unfaithfulness represented Israel's spiritual adultery with idols. Hosea chapter 1 verses 2 to 3. Their children's symbolic names declare judgment and future restoration. Hosea's personal story dramatizes covenant love and God's persistent mercy despite rebellion. The book powerfully blends judgment and hope, showing divine compassion prevailing over sin. Hosea chapter 11 verses 8 to 9, anticipating redemption for a straying people. Question 20. Which king of Judah was assassinated after ignoring God's warning through a prophet? A. Amaziah. B. Jehoshaphat. C. Joash. D. Hezekiah. You get 10 seconds. That's A. Amaziah. Amaziah began as a king who did what was right, yet not wholeheartedly. After defeating Edom, he brought their gods home and worshipped them. God sent a prophet to rebuke him, but Amaziah rejected the warning. Later, he provoked Israel's king Joash to battle and lost. Fleeing to Lachish, he was hunted down and assassinated. His downfall highlights pride, idolatry, and ignoring divine counsel. 2 Chronicles chapter 25. Stay with us until the end of the video to see how many Bible quiz questions you got right. Don't forget to note your score and share it with us in the comments section. Let's explore and learn more about the Bible with these fun and interesting questions. Question 21. Who hid spies on her roof and later joined Israel's people? A. Eli, B. Gad, C. Samuel, D. Nathan. You get 10 seconds. That's C. Samuel. Samuel, a prophet and judge, anointed Saul by God's command as Israel's first king. 1 Samuel chapter 10, verse 1. After Saul's disobedience, God sent Samuel to anoint David. The youngest son of Jesse. Samuel bridged the era from judges to monarchy, emphasizing obedience over sacrifice. His role shaped Israel's political and spiritual identity, demonstrating divine sovereignty in choosing leaders. Question 22. Which king saw the writing Mene, Mene, Tekel, Parsin? A. Cyrus, B. Darius, C. Artaxerxes, D. Belshazzar. You get 10 seconds. That's D. Belshazzar. During a blasphemous feast using Jerusalem's temple vessels, Belshazzar witnessed mysterious writing on the wall. Daniel chapter 5 verses 1 to 5. Daniel interpreted it as God's judgment, his days numbered, weighed, and divided. That night Babylon fell to the Medes and Persians. This event underscores divine justice, human accountability, and the certainty of God's rule over kingdoms. Arrogance and sacrilege hastened Belshazzar's downfall. Question 23. Who built the first altar mentioned in Scripture? A. Abel, B. Noah, C. Cain, D. Abraham. You get 10 seconds. That's B. Noah. After the flood, Noah built an altar and offered clean animals and birds as burnt offerings. Genesis chapter 8, verse 20. God accepted the sacrifice and promised never again to destroy the earth by flood, establishing the covenant and sign of the rainbow. Though Cain and Abel offered earlier sacrifices, Noah's altar is the first explicitly recorded. The scene highlights worship, covenant renewal, and humanity's fresh beginning under God's mercy. Question 24. Who hid spies on her roof and later joined Israel's people? A. Rahab, B. Jael, C. Ruth, D. Deborah. You get 10 seconds. That's A. Rahab. Rahab sheltered 2 Israelite spies in Jericho and hid them under flax stalks. Joshua chapter 2, verse 6. Acknowledging God's supremacy, she sought mercy for her family. The scarlet cord signaled her house during Jericho's fall. Once spared, she joined Israel and appears in the Messiah's genealogy. Her story illustrates faith emerging from unlikely places and God's inclusion of repentant outsiders. Question 25. Which wise official survived both Babylonian and Persian empires? A. Shadrach, B. Ezra, C. Nehemiah, D. Daniel. You get 10 seconds. That's D. Daniel. Daniel served faithfully under multiple rulers from Babylon's Nebuchadnezzar to Persia's Darius. Daniel chapter 1 verse 21, chapter 6 verse 28. His integrity, prayer life, and divine wisdom preserved him through political upheaval, even in the lion's den. Daniel's long career symbolizes God sustaining his people in exile and wielding influence in foreign courts. His apocalyptic visions shape biblical eschatology and highlight God's unshakable kingdom across empires. Amazing! You made it. Well played. From altars in Genesis to edicts in Persia, these aren't mere trivia. They're threads in God's unfolding story. If this sharpened your understanding, please like, share, and subscribe. Drop your score in the comments. Name the toughest question, and share one takeaway you'll live this week: courage like Elijah, faith like Rahab, or wisdom like Daniel. As in Proverbs chapter 1 verse 7, quote, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge." Until next time, study deeply, live faithfully, and keep turning the pages. May God bless you.